Reverse discrimination, to me, is not believing that that person might be disabled or sick or challenged, like assuming that that person must be fine because they look fine and they seem fine. That's reverse discrimination. And expecting them to perform at a certain level up to par that they might actually not be able to perform at because they are dealing with an illness or a disability. But even though it doesn't look like it is. Reverse discrimination is also being rude to somebody just because of how they look. I've done it. Like I said in my last video, being rude to a girl because she had blonde hair and like tan skin and had a kind of a Barbie-ish like style, about her. I assumed that she was snobby and bitchy when she's actually a very nice girl and was dealing with dyslexia, um, as she indicated to me. You don't know somebody until you know them, right? Like you can't just look at somebody and decide, they must be a total snob because they're, or a total like arrogant sod because they're, so good looking or put so well together. Like a lot of people just put themselves together well because they're kind of a type A personality and they like to be in control and be organized, and so that doesn't mean they're a bad person, and it doesn't mean they're full of themselves necessarily. um, I used to put myself together really well, kind of for the purpose of scraping by in life, and kind of not having my disabilities be noticed. Wasn't getting the right help, so I had to kind of survive through things. So I learned to present well, and I had to get the job, and I had to rely on looking good to get through in part, and then later dressing up became more of like an artistic and creative thing once I discovered more about who I am, and now it's really just fun and creative. I'm super flaming girly girl that way with fashion. I love boas and heels and makeup. It's just playtime to me. It's really an innocent thing. And so it's like it's rude when people don't know your story, right? Like I'm doing it because I want to play and have fun. And um, like I could lose my life at any time. Ehlers-Danlos is like that. And I have been warned by the neurosurgeon that there's a small chance that I could just have a sudden death, apparently. And I'm kind of living, I'm living that way. Like I'm operating on, well, I want to be fulfilled if something happens or if something's going to happen. Really just don't know somebody's story when you judge and criticize them. And I always, I've done it both ways. I've judged and criticized like people for being stupid jocks and neurotypicals and whatever, and maybe they're nice people. Maybe they're not necessarily snobs. Maybe some of them are, but you just don't know until you get to know somebody. Um, it I know how hurtful it is to have people assume that I'm a certain way just by looking at me and being like, oh, she must be like a total like kook head narcissist, whatever. It's like, you don't know my story. You don't know that I never got a chance to be an adolescent. You don't know that I've spent the past decade in severe pain with doctors and people not listening to me or believing me until it's like almost too late. And now I'm trying to like, you know, cope, right? So you don't know my story, right? Everybody's got a story, like that Amanda Marshall song. I love that Amanda Marshall song. It's actually one of my favorite songs. Actually, I just love Amanda Marshall in general. She's like one of the most talented songwriters ever. Um, that was random, but yeah, reverse discrimination is basically when you are, um, at least my coinage isn't a word. It's when you judge somebody based on their appearance in the way of um, that they look good and fine, so they must not be sick or disabled, or they must be like full of themselves or like arrogant or whatever. It's like basically judging somebody for like looking good, presenting well, seeming fine, seeming strong, seeming smart, looking good, that sort of thing. Judging somebody in a way that is like detrimental to that person, whether you're like assuming their character when you don't know them, or whether you're like discounting any vulnerability or disability that person might have. So hopefully that makes sense. And it's not a taboo subject, because I've been afraid to like mention this subject for a long time, but it's really important that I mention it, because there are many people out there that are suffering with the reverse discrimination and not be able to like get the right help that they need because of the pressure on them to perform up to par to some kind of expectation, and then they get caught in that cycle like I did, where they're just performing and performing and performing until they break down and they say, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And then there's a shame in that. They feel ashamed because they have been held themselves up to this particular standard that, in fairness, they really were never able to safely meet. And this causes people to eventually wind up hurt and broken and crippled. And it's not necessary. If we just kind of thought objectively, and if we just tried to refrain from making surface judgments and assumptions, it's fine to admire someone and say, gee, they look good, you look nice today, like, isn't that a nice outfit that you have on? Don't you have pretty eyes? Don't you have nice hair? Don't you have a nice smile? Fine. But you don't then assume that that person is super duper well and everything's going hunky-dory, you know, rainbows and whatever in their lives just because of that, you know? It's kind of a silly surface assumption. We need to kind of like judge in layers rather than judge a layer. So does that make sense? Judge in layers. So you judge one layer. Gee, that person looks good. Or that person seems charismatic. Isn't that nice? Good for them. And be happy for them. And then the next layer that you judge doesn't happen and shouldn't happen until you talk to that person and get to know them. You cannot make a judgment on how someone's doing or their character or anything until you do that, period.